Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We have the famous Jim Brown, the designer of the Windrider 17. We're going to go through all his thoughts here, and we're going to go over the design, the origins of the Windrider 17. We're actually sitting in his Windrider 17 right now. It's the turtle.
Box turtle.
The box turtle. But we're going to sit down. We're going to discuss the origins, the design, what was bad, what is good. And hey guys, my name's Ziggy, and I'm out boat camping the barrier islands of the Gulf of Mexico. So jump aboard, because I'm going to take you bastards sailing. Yeah, we'll check that out. And then
the last one is
anchoring,
anchoring,
which a lot of people question about anchoring. Any multi-hulls have issues with anchoring.
Yeah, multi-hulls can be the very best type of vessel on an anchor if you're anchoring over the bow with a bridle. That's two lines leading out to the chain on the anchor, coming back to the boat. And you tie one line up on one side out there on one cross beam, or put on a cleat out there, and the other one over there, so the boat's riding into the wing on this long bridle. And if it starts to swing, one bridle goes slack, or the other one goes taut, and the boat will ride dead head to wind, even in very strong wind and big waves. It can be, a multi-hull can be the best anchoring situation, but the Windrider is especially bad for what they call, I think they call it sallying. That would be the sailor's term for it, where she wants to sail around on the anchor. She wants to really oscillate from one side of the scope to the other, and it drags the anchor line and the chain across the bottom. It can help work the anchor in to bite better, but it can also pull it out, depending on the nature of the bottom. It's a lot of trouble to set up the bridle. It's a real nuisance, and so there's a pretty easy way out of it if you're not anchoring in waves or a big chop. It's to anchor from the stern, because if you anchor over the stern, the boat will ride dead downwind without sallying.
All right. Where do you anchor tie the anchor to it?
Well, I put a big cleat on the stern, and we can
right on. Okay, we'll check that out. Okay.
Yeah. But there's another problem with anchoring a Windrider. If you're going to leave it out there when the wind is blowing enough to make a chop, it'll cause the rig to rattle around. Remember I said don't set up the rig too tight. It wants to be slack. Well, if the boat is jumping around in the wind, it'll fatigue the wire in the rigging because of all of the motion of the mast being kind of loose while the boat's lying on anchor. And so if you're going to anchor, whether from the bow or the stern, in exposed water, it's a good idea to go up on one shroud, take a turn of line around the shroud, above the shroud bridle. Actually push it up the shroud as high as you can, and pull it over and tie it to someplace else on the boat. Any place. You can actually tie it to the mast cleat if you want to, and pull hard on that baby. Set it up hard so as to put some spring in the rigging while the boat's laying alone on anchor, in exposed position.
You know what? Here's a question I've wondered: is it has the ball at the bottom of the mast, so it's a turning mast.
Yeah. And
I see a lot of the big multi-hulls have the same things, whereas mono-hulls don't have that. Is there an engineering issue? Why do multi-hulls? I see a lot of them have the turning mast. The ball. Is it an advantage, a disadvantage?
It's a wonderful advantage.
Okay.
The Beach Cat rig, a so-called rotating mast rig, makes a tremendous difference, like maybe 40% difference.
Wow.
In the power that the mainsail can put out.
Because it's aiming into the wind. And all right.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can demonstrate with my hands here, but let's say that the wind is blowing from the camera. You're looking right at the leading edge of the mast. And we're going to go off on this tack, and rotate the mast again so that it's pointing at the camera. We'll be sailing 45 degrees or so off of the true wind. But the mast itself is still pointing into the wind. And what that allows the air to do. What that allows the air to do is that the air, I can turn my hand around, the bulge in the mast, it's a teardrop section in the mast, and the air will encounter the mast and wrap around the back side of it on the downwind side of the mast, and it will flow off of the back side of the mast and onto the sail without there being any bust, any break in the shape there. There's no bust in the shape, so the air can flow smoothly from the mast to the sail without developing so-called turbulent flow on the back side of the mast. Now the upwind side of the mast, the windward side, it's vacuum, and turbulence there is not harmful. But turbulence on the downwind side of the mast is really harmful, because what we're trying to do is to get that wind to go fast. If it moves faster over the downwind side of the mast than it does over the upwind side, it means that velocity, wind velocity creates low pressure. It creates vacuum, and turbulent flow destroys that vacuum.
Okay.
The slot between the mast and the sail bleeds air through from the pressure side to the vacuum side, and so you lose a little bit. Now, another way to look at that we could get all involved in the discussion of so-called leading edge slats and all that stuff. It gets to be very aeronautical. But anyway, the Beach Cat rig with that rotating mast, if you want to test to determine how much improvement you get out of the mainsail by being able to rotate the mast, you can make a little experiment. It does it by itself sometimes. If you tack the boat, sometimes the mast won't tack at the same time. If the mast is rotated the wrong way or facing straight ahead, and you come onto a new tack, the boat will sit there and it'll gradually develop headway. But just as it starts to move forward, the jib and the rest of the mainsail have done enough to overcome your momentum. At that point, reach up and grab the boom and push it forward and cause the mast to rotate, and all of a sudden you'll feel the boat jump. It's a tremendous difference in the thrust that you get out of the mainsail that's given by being able to rotate the mast.
Okay. And
in this rig, for this boat, you don't have to worry about rotating too much. You really can't over-rotate this mast. The way the shrouds approach the mast up at the so-called hounds.
Yes.
There's more sailor talk.
The hounds.
Where all the rigging comes together about 2/3 of the way up the mast. Right up there, the shroud on the upwind side will bear against the mast and keep it from rotating too much.
You said you wanted it like as the differences as the owners change.
Oh, the owners of the company.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. We can talk about that. We've already got a lot of stuff on tape, and this can go on and on. As you'll see, I'm a broken record on the subject, but I'm glad to talk to you guys, you in the Windrider owners group, and anyone else who wants to listen. There's a lot of blab here that doesn't matter unless you're into Windriders. Okay, as far as being famous is concerned, please understand.
He wants $1. He's a very famous multi-hull, cruising multi-hull designer.
Give me another
father
$1.
of it all. There's another $1. Cha-ching.
No, I don't. No, maybe that's about what it's worth. It's this multi-hull design. When I got started in it 65 years ago, it was such a small field that it didn't take much to be known in that group, and I've parlayed that by being a mouthy, a vociferous multi-hull proponent for the last 65 years, and I'm really glad to talk to you Windrider guys. Okay, let's talk about the Windrider 17, primarily the 17. Maybe someday we'll talk about the 16.
Yep.
Well, the only trouble with the 16 is you can't take anybody with you.
Yeah.
But otherwise, the people that have both and really love sailing both prefer sailing the 16.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like motorcycling. But I sailed my 16 for years here, and then I got a dog, and I couldn't take my dog on the 16, so I got this, about that time the 17-footer came out. So the difference, what happened between the ownership of the, now I'm thinking there were 4 owners of the Windrider assets. The first owner was a large paddle sports manufacturer called Wilderness Systems Kayaks. It grew astronomically and was later sold under the name Confluence Water Sports, and was bought by another big paddle manufacturer down in Tennessee, and both companies combined, and they're definitely the largest in the world now, and they're called Confluence Water Sports. But well, I came into it in the early '90s. Had a chance meeting with Andy, and he was the guy that was running Wilderness Systems at the time. He was in charge of sales, and his partner, John Shepard, was responsible for getting the boats out the door. And they grew phenomenally all during the time that I've known them. And when it came to sell out, the new buyer, well, the boat was, the company was leveraged. So there was a lot of financial pushing and shoving going on during the buyout. And the new owner didn't know anything about sailing.
Okay.
Neither did Andy and John. Well, John had been a sailor, yeah, John Shepard. But Andy didn't know anything about sailing anyway. But he thought that the kayaking craze was going to peak out, and he wanted to add a sailing division to his company in order to diversify a bit. And that's how I came into working with Wilderness Systems. But the new owner of the company, and I can't remember quite when it was sold, but I'm thinking it was maybe around the time of 2006 or 7. The managers there were under heavy financial pressure because of the leveraging during the buyout, and they didn't want to lose their focus on paddle sports, and so they sold the Windrider division to another company at that time. Those people, it was just a guy who was a sailor, and he was attracted to the Windrider, and but he had to put the money together, and so he brought in several of his friends, and some of them were sailors and some of them were not. But the big thing that they did not have, that Andy had, was an established dealer network. And so, and they didn't know a darn thing about marketing, and so they tried to make a living at the company, but they didn't manufacture anything themselves. They had to buy everything outside. They could not rotomold their own hulls, which was a tremendous saving for Andy to be able to do that. He already had the rotomolding equipment for making kayaks by the thousands. Incidentally, Andy Zimmerman, I think, is maybe the only guy around who has literally built 1 million boats.
It's a lot of boats.
Yeah. So when the first new owners started to run into losses, they were stroking their chins and trying to make changes in the boat and then marketing strategy and all that stuff. And they had sold one to a guy who had a winter resort, a winter retreat down in Belize. And that guy had his boat down there in Belize. They pulled it up on the beach and went home one day, and here came this guy walking down the beach, and there was this Windrider sitting there on the sand, and the guy looked at it. He was not a sailor, but there was something about the looks of the boat that reached him deeply, and he said, man, I could sell those things. And he was into marketing.
Okay.
So he went back and bought the company.
Wow. So it sounds like those shaving commercials.
Yes.
I bought the company.
Yeah. And he brought his son in onto the deal. His son had just graduated as a Phi Beta Cap in psychology, and knew nothing of boats. Neither of them really. And so and as a matter of fact, they didn't even know how to sail. And they were a quick learn. Mm-hmm. They were coming along. Oh, okay. But at about that point, they decided to stop paying the designer his design royalty. And they had legal right to do that, right. It turns out. But the word got out that these guys were not paying the artist. You know?
Okay.
And I think that began to pinch their sales. And then the economy went into a tailspin. Other things happened. Neither did they have an established dealer network. Mm-hmm. You know, Andy had a huge dealer network because of all of his kayaks.
Yes. You know? I own Perceptions, which was actually Perception Kayak. I think is tied into that family.
Yeah.
Yes, I have two of them.
Now the Windrider assets have been sold to another outfit that has other sailboats in its lineup. But they've run into manufacturing difficulties, again, because they don't do it themselves. They've had problems with the roto molder who does their hulls for them. Oh, actually, this is one roto molder back, one owner back. That's right. Anyway, they're not building boats. They bought the assets for nothing. With the idea that they would build on order. Mm-hmm. But they haven't had any orders at a price that these people can build the boat. So I think it won't be manufactured again. They might build you one on order if you're willing to pay a lot of money for it. But anyway, that's why it's not easy to find a Windrider these days. There are a few used ones that show up now and then, but the people really like them. Andy Zimmerman, the original guy, decided that he wanted a 16 recently, mm-hmm. and he found two of them and bought them both.
Yeah, grab them up.
Yeah, that gives you an idea of some of the machinations that go along in any big manufacturing outfit. You know, there have been so many kayaks and kayak builders out there that they're no longer a product; they're a commodity. You know, Windrider is closely tied to kayaking. For a long time, many of the boats were sold through kayak dealers, but that was not all that successful. Ziggy, the kayak dealers often didn't have the space for these sprawling things.
It takes a lot of real estate to stretch these out.
Yeah, and very often the kayak paddlers didn't know anything of sailing, and so they had to find a place to demo the boats and learn to sail in order to be able to teach people to sail and all of that. So the boats were, in the end, the most successful marketers were established sailboat dealerships. Mm-hmm. And some of them sold a lot of boats, you know.
They're all over. It amazes me this, people contact me from all over the world with these things.
Well, I think there's something like 1,000 of the 17s out there and something like 2,000 of the 16s.
All right. And they last forever. They just keep going.
I don't know about forever. I'm thinking that a couple 100,000 years from now.
Yeah, they might not. The archaeologists will go, what the heck is this?
Yeah, find them buried in the sand, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm sure glad to be able to talk to you folks. If it gets too wordy, I'm hoping Ziggy will divide this thing up into several parts.
You're good right there. All right, it's the box turtle. It's got lots and lots of room in there. It's amazing, the room in there. All built up on top of the first prototype Windrider made. This is the baby. This is the boy where it all started right here. as Jim closes up his boat and we go in for some lunch. We'll wrap this series up right here. You can find all 7 episodes on a playlist named Jim Brown on my channel here. Literally the nicest guy you've ever met. So thank you for subscribing. I'll see you on the next run, cuz I'm gonna take you bastards sailing.